A few years ago, one of our speaker's comrades died in Florida, and he went to the funeral. He had been in touch with him since they ETS'd out of the Army, 1st Infantry Division, Big Red 1. At the wake funeral, another of their unit members was there, and between the two of them, they chatted, and well, he knew so-and-so, and so-and-so knew so-and-so, and out of that funeral germinated the idea of getting together for a reunion. And it happened, and out of that reunion came a compilation of the experiences of all of these members, of what happened to them in Vietnam. Our speaker, Patrick McLaughlin, founded the Cleveland litigation firm of McLaughlin Law, former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Ohio, appointed by President Reagan. He served in Nam, as I mentioned, with the 1st Battalion, 18th Infantry, Big Red 1, from January 67 to January 68. He was an enlisted man, infantry squad leader. Among his decorations include the CIB, the Silver Star, and the Purple Heart. Patrick is one of only 10 Ohio veterans inducted into both the Ohio Veterans Hall of Fame and the Ohio Military Hall of Fame for valor. He was named the 2012 Outstanding Veteran of the Year by the Joint Veterans Commission of Cuyahoga County. He is the long-serving president of Greater Cleveland Veterans Memorial, and that will add the names of Greater Cleveland War Dead from Iraq and Afghanistan to the Center Fountain Memorial of Cleveland Veterans Memorial Plaza this year. Patrick rides a 2000 Ford Heritage Softail Classic. He and his wife, Christine, have 3 sons and 3 grandchildren. Patrick 4, Claire 2, and Ely, am I pronouncing it?
Al.
Al.
Yeah. It's a French name, I don't know how that happened.
And are ready for more. I don't know if that means he's ready for more children or grandchildren.
Or grandchildren.
Anyhow, we're honored this evening to have Patrick amongst us. Patrick?
Thank you. I'll rearrange things a little bit, if that's all right. See if I can move this. Someone stand off to the side. And thank you, Casey. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, my honor. Thank you.
That way I can see everybody and everybody can see me.
Okay, so you got a place to put that? Can you put that on the belt? This is like Fox News, isn't it? Hope it works. And maybe clip that on your tie.
If you turn it on.
So,
Well, it worked. I tried it with my grandkids and it worked for that. Here, let me help.
wait a second. Yeah, this way. Huh?
Yeah, that'll work.
So you think this works?
It'll work.
Well, look, I appreciate the invitation, host 801, and I want you to know that I'm a lifetime member of the Legion. And so I'm pleased to be here. I'm a member of the post at the 1st Division Museum at Cantini in Illinois, just outside of Chicago, and that's the McCormick post. And as a veteran of the Big Red 1, I serve on the advisory board for the museum, and so they recruited me to become a member of that post, and I'm pleased to be there. You know, it's interesting, when I was appointed the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Ohio in 1984, the first invitation I received to give a speech was from the American Legion post in Euclid. And so this was in 1984, and I went out and I spoke and still had a lot of passion and unresolved issues about Vietnam and how America had treated the Vietnam veteran in 1984. And by then, you know, America had not come to its senses, frankly, about how to treat us. And so after my remarks, the gentleman came up to me, complimented me on what I had to say. and he introduced himself as Frank Lawshy. And I recognized the name, but I honestly didn't know much about it, not having grown up in Ohio. Did my research later, found out that he formerly was the mayor of Cleveland, two-time governor of the state of Ohio, and twice elected senator. And so it was a real pleasure to meet him and have him come up. And then a couple of other occasions I saw him when I attended sessions with Chester Cook, if you remember him, at the various veterans holidays we would have. Let me ask you all, show of hands, how many Vietnam veterans do we have in this room? Okay. How many veterans of other wars do we have in it? What wars that?
Where you go?
All right, good. Thank you, sir. And then we have veterans that served during peacetime. Well, the Legion has to get some younger veterans, and I know that was a big problem for us, as you may remember. And it took a while for Vietnam veterans to begin to join the traditional veterans organizations. You know, tonight, I don't have any prepared text. I thought I'd talk about a few things that I hope would be of some interest to you. And just a little bit about my background. And I think many of you will probably find some of this familiar, because it sounded an awful lot like you, I think. I graduated from high school in 1964, and I went out working on the old ore boats, the ore freighters, and then I began going to school during the evening in Tri-C when it was brand new downtown, and working during the day. But I, realized that there was a war going on, and as a Air Force brat, my dad having spent 22 years in the military, starting initially with the Army, the infantry before World War II, and then he went to flight school and he flew P-38s and then B-25s out of the Aleutians, and then switched over to the Air Force when they came on board. It was clear to me that I was going to serve at some point, and so even though I had a 2S deferment, taking at least 12 credit hours, I went down and volunteered for the draft, and the ladies at the draft board tried to talk me out of it. Well, honey, you don't have to go in. You have a 2S deferment. I said, I know I do, but I'm ready to go in, because I had done my calculations. And as you all remember, if you got drafted, it was 2 years. But if you wanted to enlist, it was typically 3 or 4 years, depending on the branch. And so I was eager to go in, pay my dues, serve the country, and then get out and finish college. And so I went in, got to Fort Benning, Georgia, actually on my birthday, July 23rd of 1966. They did not have a birthday cake waiting for me when I got there. And then did my basic at Benning, and then my infantry AIT at Fort Gordon, came home, and then went straight to Vietnam. Got there very early in 1967. And was assigned to Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 18th Infantry, as JC indicated. And it's a division of the Big Red 1. And learned a little bit about its history for the first time when I was there. Didn't know anything about it. And the 18th Infantry was constituted in 1861 here in Ohio, outside of Columbus. Fought in a lot of the major campaigns during the Civil War, and then fought in the Indian campaigns, the Spanish-American War, and then in World War I, joined up with the Big Red 1, the 1st Division, Expeditionary Division in Europe, and then fought with the Big Red 1 in Europe, again with that unit in the Second World War, through North Africa, Sicily, Omaha Beach on D-Day, and then through all the fighting in Europe and on into Germany and then Czechoslovakia. At the end of the war, the 18th served as the honor guard for the Nuremberg war crime trials. And so it's a proud unit. Did not serve in Korea, but then again, from 65 to 70, served in Vietnam. And so for 40 plus years, after I came back and I went to college and then went to law school, and even though I had a honorable discharge, I actually joined the Army Reserves, and they eventually assigned me to a JAG unit. And after I graduated from law school and completed the obligatory 2 years of practice at the time, then I was commissioned as an officer in the JAG Corps and then stayed in the active reserves for 14 years. But with a few exceptions, I had lost contact with the guys I served with in Vietnam, and we had lost contact with one another, frankly. And then one of the guys in my squad, Tom Mercer from Tennessee, about 6, 7 years ago, began trying to find us. And he did. He found a bunch of us and said, let's have a reunion. So for 6 years ago, for the first time in over 40 years, we got together in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And we've had a reunion every year since then. And just the weekend before last, I was down in Nashville, Tennessee, reunion with the guys, and including a number of them who were in my squad. And essentially, we have guys that served with Charlie Company in the 1st of the 18th, beginning in 66, 67, 68, and into 69. And so they're like family. I walked away from that with an uplifted feeling that I had been among family, and I've gotten to know some of the wives and some of the children of the other guys, including even those that served in the unit, but at different times than I did. So I didn't know them in Vietnam, but I know them now. And it's been great to get together, honestly. We've really enjoyed it. And so out of that experience came a book. And I remember Tom said to me, he said, you know, Mac, which is what I got dubbed by actually O'Brien, whose eulogy I gave at that funeral in Florida that J.C. mentioned, who was the squad leader for the 2nd Squad of Lingwood Platoon. He dubbed me Mac shortly after I got to him, and it stuck with me, and all the guys still call me Mac. Said, you know, look, we ought to write a book. And so I'm somewhat of a practical guy. And I said, you don't just write a book. You've got to, you know, you've got to collect the stories. Somebody's got to edit it. Somebody's got to publish it. It's an expensive proposition. We approached the 1st Division Museum in Cantini, and Paul Herbert, the director of the museum, retired Army colonel, said, look, if you guys write the book, we'll edit it and publish it. And so we wrote it, and they did. And in May of 2012, we had our reunion at the museum, and they just, you know, laid the red carpet out for us and treated us so well. We had well over 100 of us with family members, and it was just a lovely occasion. And out of it came this book, Dogface Charlie. Dogface was the call sign for the battalion, the 1st Battalion, 18th Infantry. Our commander at the time was Lieutenant Colonel Dick Cavazos, who went on to become a 4-star general and is an Army legend in the infantry. Is in the Ranger Hall of Fame, and just a great infantry commander. And when he made us Dogface soldiers, we were then and will forever be Dogface soldiers. And I think that comes across in this book, which is a compilation of short stories written by a lot of the guys. And indeed, a sister of one of the guys who died with us, the widow of one, we have wives in here. It's a very interesting and unique book, and the focus of which is the unit, so that you see men coming and going and advancing, and of course some leaving by dust off, some not leaving at all. But it's not about gore, and although I think that just comes with the territory, but it's really about the uplifting stories of grunts, 11 Bravos, but on a daily basis living in a wartime environment. I mean, most of the kids are, you know, 19, 20 years old. I brought a few extra ones with me, and so if anybody wants one, I can sell it to you at cost, which is $20. Otherwise, you can just get online and Google it at Dogface Charlie, and it'll pop up. You can order them through the 1st Division Museum at Cantini. And if you don't mind, I'll read a little section from. Anybody have any objection if I read a little bit from my story in this book? And anybody who's been to Vietnam, I think, would appreciate this part of it. And I'll read a few of the paragraphs. What I tried to do when I wrote my article, which is my main article, which is called The Price of a Smile. I tried to blend in some of the experiences that your combat instrument would have seen in Vietnam and sort of put it together in such a way that it would paint a picture, it would describe something so that even if you hadn't been there, you might get some sense of what it was like. So this is what I write, and the sort of the heading is Many Enemies in Nam. The enemy wasn't the only problem we faced. The mosquitoes were relentless and big as dragonflies. We bathed in bug juice, Army-issued insect repellent. We reeked of it, but those damn bugs still came around. And with them came malaria. If the malaria was severe enough, the grunt was choppered back for a hospital stay, then back to the boonies. We feared the red ants, and always took pains to ensure we did not bed down on those devils. They were mean and so aggressive that they would leap out of trees or bushes to get to you. Perhaps even more hated were the leeches. We were magnets, drawing the leeches to us, and often couldn't challenge the bloodsuckers for fear of exposing our position. So we gritted our teeth and tried to think about anything other than which body part or orifice was the next target. When we returned to the perimeter in the morning, we stripped down, and our buddies helped in finding and removing the blood-sated bastards we couldn't easily reach. The art was to pull out the leech without leaving its head and whatever body part it was attached. Two methods worked best: pour bug juice on the critter, or my favorite, touch it with the lid end of a cigarette. Then there were the snakes, many kinds, some big, some small. The big ones, the pythons and the boa constrictors, really weren't too much of a concern. You could easily see them, but the little ones were a different story.
The one step.
We knew one as the bamboo viper, more notoriously referred to as the two-step snake. Once bitten, you take 2 steps, then you die. The tarantulas were big and hairy and liked to climb in the poncho liners with us to stay warm. I saw 3 types of scorpions, black, red, and white. We also had tigers, panthers, and wild boars cross our paths at various times. Not all illnesses or deaths occurred on the spot. Some enemies lay dormant for years, only to emerge in various deadly forms. The infantry spent a lot of time in the jungle, the very jungle that some geniuses decided to defoliate in order to deny our enemies its concealment. They used Agent Orange. We grunts lived in it, patrolled in it, bathed in it, and slept in it. Many have died from it since. Children of Vietnam veterans have been born with deformities, causally related to their father's service in Nam. More vets will continue to die from its effects. After decades of wearing blinders, our own Veterans Administration decided that a number of illnesses are linked to exposure to Agent Orange. Diabetes, type 2, ischemic heart disease, Parkinson's disease, prostate cancer, Hodgkin's disease, B-cell leukemia, peripheral neuropathies, and other illnesses and disorders with, no doubt, more to be identified. Given the option, we would have taken our chances straight up against the men we faced. So that's a little piece of my way of describing some of what we lived in for that time that I was there. And I think I've got some other sections of the story, The Price of a Smile, that sort of parallel that same sort of thing and talk about point men, talk about the pew-style bunkers that we used to dig in with overhead cover, and we were like the old Roman legions. Depew was the division commander at the end of '66 and in '67, and he decreed that all infantry battalions in the 1st Division out in the field, you couldn't bed down until you had your foxhole. We carried sandbags with us. We carried axes and chainsaws, and we would cut down overhead cover, and so you had to have 2 layers of sandbags on top of your foxhole to form a bunker, firing ports going out at 45-degree angles, extra dirt in front to form a berm to give you some insulation, And then eventually General Hay, who then succeeded him, decreed that there would be a little sleeping area behind each bunker, several sandbags high, sort of protect somebody if they hit you with mortars, rockets, small arms, and you wouldn't have a lot of guys get hit before they, wiped the sleep out of their eyes and jumped in the bunker. And so I write about that and in great detail and some of the things. And of course, the reason why I wrote the story, which I wasn't going to write for the book at all, but the guys talked me into it, told me they wanted me to write the story about our fight at McLaughlin, and Dave knows about that. And starting on October 29th of 1967, we went up there and fought for the next 6 days. We were the blocking battalion that was placed right between the Special Forces camp and airstrip at McLaughlin and the Cambodian border. And our job was to block the enemy reinforcements coming in and to also block the unit that had attacked the Special Forces camp and the airstrip as they tried to get back into Cambodia. And so I'm glad now that I did write. I spent months interviewing guys, reading everything I could on it to make sure that everything in there is factually correct. And when I didn't have something that I could go with, I went with my recollection. And that's the way I wrote it. And so that's why my name's on it. And to me, it's the definitive short story piece on at least my unit's fight at that battle in 1967. So it's been, it was a therapeutic exercise for me. I encourage all of you that served in your unit, and I think one of the things that we're all proud about, and the 1st Division Museum in Cantini, and it's part of the Cantini Military History Series. They published some books, they published some great books about Big Red One history from World War I, World War II, and Vietnam. They say that this book is very unique because it's a compilation of stories by a number of different men who served in a unit over a period of time. And so we're proud of that, and they've actually approached us recently to see if we would actually write a second book. We've got some new guys we found new guys, and reunion we just had. We had a few new guys there that have not been with us, and we're still continuing to reach out and find others. And so we think we might have enough in us, even though we're getting to be old timers, to do a second book. And so I encourage anybody else to think about that. And one of the personal byproducts for my having written is that my sons have 3 boys, and they have said to me that they're so pleased that I have written this because they consider it a part of family history, and that had I not written these stories, they would not have known about them, which is true, and their children would not know about it. So they see it as a positive family history thing, which actually makes me proud. The other thing I wanted to mention tonight is that I'm president, Jason mentioned, I'm president of a group called the Greater Cleveland Veterans Memorial Organization. A little bit of history here is that I joined the group shortly after it was formed by Vietnam veterans. They recruited me when I was still the U.S. Attorney, so this is 1987 when I got involved. And it was a group of Vietnam veterans with the objective of building a memorial in the Greater Cleveland area for Vietnam veterans. Just to refresh your recollection, as you know, the Soldiers and Sailors Monument on Public Square deals with the Civil War. The so-called Cleveland War, this is the formal name, the Cleveland War Memorial Fountain of Eternal Life, which is on what's known as formerly Mall, between the Key Tower and what used to be the Cleveland Education Building. That's that majestic statue, that 46-foot bronze statue rising up, considered to be Marshall Frederick's probably most significant work among many. Very famous architect. Was 18 years in the fabrication. The figure represents mankind rising from the ashes of war. And that memorial, when it was dedicated in 1964, 50 years ago, contained the names of the Greater Cleveland War Dead. The definition of Greater Cleveland is Cuyahoga County, from World War II and Korea, and the Korean War. So, circling back to what then was the Greater Cleveland Vietnam Veterans organization, as opposed to the Greater Cleveland Veterans Memorial Organization. We reached out, we decided that it was unfair that the guys from World War I also did not have a memorial. We thought that that was inappropriate. And so we said, look, if we're going to work to do something for the Vietnam War dead, then we're going to cover the World War I war dead. And then, of course, as history would have it, you know, we're losing lives in Iraq and Afghanistan. So we expanded our horizons and we began the effort of research. And it took us really 15 years. But 10 years ago, on the 40th anniversary of the dedication of the memorial, we, our organization, rededicated the Center Fountain Memorial of the Cleveland War Memorial. On that occasion, we added 1,361 names of Greater Cleveland War Dead. We picked up the man who died in 1899 in the Spanish-American War. We added the names from World War I. We have 808 names from World War I. We, in our research, we found 103 names from World War II that had not been included originally. We put them on. We found 25 names from the Korean War that had not been included originally. We put them on. We added 418 names from Vietnam. And we're finding more now. And then we added the 4 names at that time of men that had died in Iraq. So fast forward, this year, on July 25th, and I certainly hope to have your support in this, we're going to rededicate the Cleveland War Memorial. So it's the 50th anniversary, 10th anniversary of the rededication, and we're going to add the 32 names of the Cuyahoga County War Dead died in Iraq and Afghanistan, 31 men and 1 woman. In addition, we found another 8 to maybe 12 names that should have been included, some that we missed, 1 from World War II, 1 from Korea, and the rest we believe from Vietnam. We're going to add those names as well. And so when I say add the names, if you've been down there, there are plaques, there are bronze plaques that surround that on what I call the Center Fountain, what we call the Center Fountain Memorial. And those plaques contain the names in alphabetical order of each person who died in that war. And so we've got to take the last plaque and have it redone. So we're removing the last plaque, have the names added, have it completely refabricated, and we're redoing the dedication plaque. And that's what the objective is. And so, you know, why do we do this? Well, why does a community honor those that have given all for duty on our country? We do it because that's the least that we can do for them and their families. Because those that have died in service to the country are gone, but their families remain. And somebody has to do this, and there really was no one doing it. And so we continue to be today a handful of Vietnam vets, essentially, that have continued to work on this project. And with some degree of pride, on July 25th, we're gonna see that at that point we're gonna have 5,542 names around the Center Fountain Memorial of the Cleveland War Memorial, plus a handful of others that we're checking out now. We have to do our research in order to establish the bona fides of meeting the criteria of being from Cuyahoga County. And so that's what a handful of us are doing now. And so, you know, I certainly would ask for the support of Legion Post 801 and and each of you individually as we do this, because as a community, it's the least that we can do to those that have given all for America. So that's sort of the remarks that I had, some of the areas I wanted to cover. You know, we might have a few moments for questions, maybe dialogue back and forth. Some of you guys could get up here and give this talk from your perspective, and I certainly appreciate that. So, any issues, questions, comments, stuff to throw at me? Well, Dave, you got it.
No, but I remember the two-step.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yes.
You were within 25 feet of my bed.
Patrick, I read the book, of course, and one of the most powerful chapters, in my opinion, was written by the sister of one of the KIAs, and they were Ohioans.
Yeah.
Any chance you might, it's a relatively brief chapter, as I recall.
Well, it's several pages long, but here's the compelling part about it. This was the sister. Her brother was killed with us. Dieter, his name. Let me see what I know. What is really particularly compelling about that. My big brother, 228. She goes on and talks about how he went in the military and had a girlfriend back home and all that, and the father was a World War II vet, and and this is what she described it. She remembered getting off the school bus on April 23rd of 1968. Saw my dad working around outside. I yelled to him and asked if he was playing hooky from work. The closer I got, I saw that he was crying. I asked if something had happened to our dog, Heidi. He told me no, that Kim had been killed in Vietnam. At first I did not believe him, but I had never seen my dad crying, so I ran into the house. Several of our neighbors were sitting with my mom, hugging her, and she was crying like I had never seen her cry before. I ran to my bedroom thinking that this can't be true. She goes on, but this is a compelling paragraph. Dad also told me that he and Mom argued with Lieutenant Colonel Rupert. He was the Army officer that came to tell them that their son had died in Vietnam. They argued with him for about an hour that Kim couldn't have been killed. Dad looked at Mom and I said, I know how he was wounded. After we thought about it, the dates matched up. The day Kim was killed, which would have been in the middle of the night for us, Dad said he woke up and saw Kim standing at the end of his and Mom's bed. Kim looked at Dad and said, oh my God, Dad, I am going to die. Dad said he broke out in a cold sweat, blinked his eye, and Kim was gone. Dad was shocked at first and thought he must have been dreaming. Settled himself down and he went back to sleep. When Kim's body came home, his wounds were just as Dad had seen them. And that's what I think you remember about that. Very, very compelling. Written by the sister of the guys. And so Dave, I wanted this is the brochure, the program we had from the rededication 10 years ago. And so it's got the names of all of the war dead from 1899 to 2004, to that point. And so some of the names I'm sure that you all will recognize.
Yes, sir. We'll put it in the post records. And I'll add just one comment. We were sitting in the bar before the meeting, and we realized that we were both in the same area at the same time in Vietnam. When he was at Loc Ninh, I was at Bù Đào, which was maybe 30 or 40 kilometers to the east. And we were monitoring the battle that was going on at the time. Yeah, so.
And so, look, I mean, I've got, if you'd like, I'm happy to give you all a copy of the talk pretty thoroughly and spread it around to some of you guys in the event they want.
Well, we appreciate that.
Yeah. Good. Did we have a question?
Yes. Point of clarification, Jerry DiCaprio. U.S. Army.
Hey, Jerry.
You mentioned that the names were dedicated from Cuyahoga County.
Yeah,
Is that what you meant?
Yes.
Not the, this
Cuyahoga
is
County.
Summit here.
yeah, no, it's a Cuyahoga County. We're an organization that, that represents Cuyahoga County,
Okay,
yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, I'm happy to be in Summit County, but this is the Cleveland War Memorial, Greater Cleveland War Memorial. And I honestly don't know if Summit County has something similar to this.
Well, if they don't, maybe they should, and some of the people here can try to get that organized.
Good. Well, thank you, sir.
Well, we'll continue the normal meeting. We have a lot of business. We have election of officers, changes in bylaws. You're certainly welcome to stay.
Well, if you don't mind, I probably don't need to be part of the business.
That's quite all right.
I've enjoyed it and I appreciate it, and it was just fun to come and talk about some of this stuff.
Okay.